Ryland Pierce never imagined the end of the world would begin with him dangling upside down from a malfunctioning maintenance harness, staring directly at an alien warship blotting out the morning sky. It wasn't the terrifying invasion that shocked him the most. It was the fact that as the ground shook, alarms blared, and people screamed, he could only think one thing: this better not be another Tuesday. Above him, the hovering battleship let out a sound like a cosmic blender trying to puree the atmosphere. Below him, a crowd scrambled in chaos. And Rylan, swinging like an accidental acrobat, muttered to himself that if the universe wanted to kill him, it could at least wait until he finished repairing the solar panel he had been assigned to. The absurdity of the moment hit him so hard that he almost forgot he was upside down when the first monument disappeared in a beam of shimmering blue light. The Eiffel Tower dissolved from existence 3 seconds later. The world collectively screamed. By the time Rylan managed to unbuckle himself and crash onto the ground like a sack of confused potatoes, the sky was already filled with dark, blade-shaped vessels. Humanity had always imagined that aliens would arrive with diplomacy or violence, but certainly not with a hobby for stealing famous landmarks. The global news network froze on a still image of the Statue of Liberty being vacuumed into space like loose laundry. In the Earth Defense Command Center, panic erupted in a way that made every disaster movie look like a peaceful yoga retreat. Officers ran back and forth shouting conflicting orders. An intern dropped 5 cups of coffee. Someone yelled that the aliens had vaporized the Sydney Opera House, only to be corrected that they had not vaporized it but surgically removed the roof in what looked like an architectural burglary. At the center of the madness, Commander Mira Solis tried desperately to command attention. She slapped a holographic screen that refused to stabilize, shouted for calm 3 times, and seriously considered flipping a desk. Finally, with the authority of a woman who had survived 2 asteroid incidents and a diplomatic disaster with angry moon colonists, she brought the room under control. All eyes turned to the global broadcast display as a new hologram flickered to life. The alien who appeared loomed over the city skyline. Taller than any human, covered in obsidian armor with glowing crimson streaks, he looked like the kind of creature nightmares hired for intimidation lessons. His voice boomed so loudly that nearby windows shattered. "I am Xyrix, conqueror of sectors, devourer of the weak, champion of competitive galactic diplomacy." The last title confused everyone. It sounded like a trophy won at a cosmic debate club. Xyrix continued with dramatic flair that suggested he had rehearsed every line. "People of Earth, your planet is acceptable. We claim ownership according to galactic expansion guidelines." Mira muttered that he sounded like a cosmic real estate agent. Xyrix raised a clawed hand as if conducting an orchestra. "However, galactic law requires that before our rightful conquest can proceed, you must be allowed a chance to earn your freedom. Present your strongest warrior. If your champion defeats me in honorable combat, we withdraw. If they fail, Earth is ours." Global silence followed. Then the panic resumed at triple volume. In the training wing, Rylan was rushing to fix a flickering interface when the door to the strategy room burst open. He stumbled inside with a toolkit, still holding a half-eaten protein bar. Generals, diplomats, and scientists turned to glare at him as if he had personally caused the invasion. Rylan awkwardly waved the protein bar. "I came to reset the panel," he said. One overeager general misunderstood the moment with catastrophic efficiency. He pointed dramatically at Rylan. "There. That is him." Rylan blinked. "Him what?" "He is volunteering to fight the alien champion." Rylan nearly inhaled the entire protein bar in shock. "I absolutely did not volunteer. I am a technician who fixes things. Preferably things that do not punch back." But the room was already spiraling. The general insisted that Rylan had walked in with purpose, which to him clearly meant he was a warrior of destiny. Another officer argued that Earth needed someone unpredictable. A scientist muttered that Rylan's file did describe him as problem-solving oriented, which apparently translated to potential galactic gladiator. Rylan tried desperately to correct them, but bureaucratic momentum was unstoppable. Outside the building, news drones and reporters swarmed like caffeinated hornets. Social feeds exploded with captions proclaiming a brave human had stepped forward. Rylan was shoved onto a podium before he could even process the situation. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded him, and a journalist screamed from the back. "How does it feel to be humanity's champion?" Rylan, still dazed, responded with honesty that later became a viral meme. "I think this is a clerical error." Despite the panic in his chest, Rylan felt the weight of billions of eyes on him. Earth was terrified. People were crying, praying, hugging strangers. For the first time, Rylan understood the impossible responsibility being shoved onto him. Later that night, Mira found him sitting alone in the dim glow of the training hangar. Her expression softened. "You do not have to do this," she said. "I will fight command if you want out." He stared at the floor. "If I say no, they choose someone else." "Someone who might have a chance," she replied. He sighed. "But what if no one does?" Mira paused. "Then at least Earth will know someone tried." Rylan looked up at the night sky, still flickering with alien vessels drifting silently overhead. The world was terrified, desperate, uncertain. And somehow he had wandered into the center of destiny by accident. He swallowed hard, heart pounding. "All right," he whispered. "I will do it." Humanity cheered across the globe. Some cried with hope. Some cried with fear. Rylan simply closed his eyes, wondering if the universe had chosen the wrong person or if it knew something he didn't. The day ended with one irreversible truth. A lone, untrained human had agreed to duel the strongest alien warrior in the galaxy, and Earth's survival hung by a thread woven from desperation, chaos, and an astonishing amount of misplaced confidence. The underground training compound had been activated only twice in the past decade, once for an asteroid drill and once because someone accidentally pressed the planetary crisis button while trying to hang a motivational poster. Now it had been fully powered for the most terrifying reason imaginable. Rylan Pierce stood at the center of a vast steel chamber surrounded by scientists in lab coats, soldiers in exosuits, and one floating drone who hummed like a judgmental mechanical bee. The air tasted like recycled oxygen and fear. Rylan shifted nervously as ERL hovered beside him. The drone recorded everything, occasionally emitting an unhelpful observation about Rylan's likely lifespan. He tried to ignore it, but ignoring ERL was like trying to ignore a mosquito armed with statistics. The first challenge of the day was something the trainers called basic physical assessment, which Rylan quickly learned translated into watching a man discover that his body was not designed for heroism. They put him on a treadmill. 5 seconds later, the treadmill put him into the wall. They gave him a punching dummy. Rylan swung with hopeful determination and sprained his wrist. They set up a simple obstacle course. He tripped 3 times and fell face first into a foam pit that somehow did not feel as soft as advertised. A row of military instructors exchanged looks of increasing concern. One whispered that Earth was doomed. Another quietly updated his retirement papers. Despite the humiliation burning in his cheeks, Rylan kept trying. He pushed himself through push-ups that resembled collapsing scaffolding. He attempted pull-ups that looked more like prolonged hanging. There was a moment during balance training when he stood on a hovering platform, wobbled dramatically, and flailed his arms like a frightened windmill before the platform tilted and launched him into a padded wall. Earl informed him that he had failed with impressive consistency. Rylan considered kicking the drone but suspected he would only injure himself again. When the trainers finally called for a break, Rylan collapsed onto a bench, sweating through his shirt and rethinking every life choice that had led him here. Mira entered the chamber with a tablet in hand. She looked from the exhausted technician's son to the despairing staff and sighed as if she had been expecting this outcome all along. "Physical combat is not your strength," she said. Rylan raised a trembling hand. "Was it the part where I flew into the wall, or the part where I nearly drowned in a foam pit?" Mira almost smiled. "Honestly, pick any moment from the last hour." But Rylan was not entirely hopeless. When they transitioned from physical training to tactical simulations, a spark awakened in him. The strategist placed him inside a virtual arena designed to mimic alien environments, and Rylan immediately did the one thing no one expected. He hacked the simulation. Not maliciously. Not even intentionally. He simply got confused by the interface, pressed a few buttons, and accidentally rewired the hazard controls. The lava pit turned into a harmless glowing puddle. The aggressive drone became stuck spinning in circles. The collapsing floor froze mid-collapse, leaving the simulation engineers staring in shock. Mira rushed over. "What did you do?" Ryland shrugged nervously. "I thought the brightness was too high, so I was trying to adjust the settings." One scientist whispered that he had somehow bypassed the triple encrypted system by accident. Another whispered that this might be the most dangerous man on Earth if left alone near buttons. The room filled with frantic typing as they checked the logs. To Ryland's surprise, his chaotic tinkering had actually been clever. Completely unintentional, but clever. They placed him into another simulation. This time the arena filled with hostile drones hunting him. Ryland grabbed a loose cable from a broken panel and fashioned a makeshift trap that disabled the drones like startled flies hitting a bug zapper. In a desert scenario, he discovered a glitch that allowed him to trigger a sandstorm at will. In the ice arena, he used a grappling system not to fight but to slingshot himself past obstacles faster than anything programmed. By the end of the day, observers crowded behind the glass, watching the technician who could not run a mile successfully exploit 3 major design flaws in their advanced training software. Earl summarized the situation with clinical cheerfulness. Ryland possesses unconventional aptitude for environmental manipulation despite catastrophic physical limitations. Ryland replied with a tired groan that he would appreciate if he phrased that more gently next time. While Earth trained its unlikely champion, far above the atmosphere on the Vorkan flagship, Xyrix reviewed surveillance captured from a stolen human broadcast signal. He watched Ryland sprint directly into a virtual wall. He watched Ryland roundhouse kick a dummy only to fall onto his back. He watched Ryland trip over a training mat that was not even on the ground properly. Xyrix cackled loud enough to rattle the bulkheads. This is their warrior. This is the protector of Earth. He is barely a functioning organism. Behind him stood Tala, the Vorkan chief scientist, who studied the footage more carefully. She paused during the simulation recordings, rewinding moments when Ryland cleverly manipulated the environment. She frowned. This human is strange. Xyrix waved dismissively. They are all strange. That is why they lose. Tala narrowed her eyes. Perhaps. But this one does not behave like a typical combatant. Xyrix scoffed. He does not behave like a typical anything. Back on Earth, late in the evening, Ryland studied recordings of Xyrix's previous tournament battles. The alien fought with ruthless efficiency, overwhelming power, and frightening speed. Every strike was devastating. Every move calculated. But something caught Ryland's attention. During a fast rotational attack, Xyrix's side armor flickered for a fraction of a second. Ryland replayed it again, staring closely. It was small, almost invisible, a tiny seam in the armor that shifted during sharp twisting motions. A weakness perhaps. Or a flaw. He scribbled it down, feeling hope spark like a match in darkness. Night settled over the compound. Ryland sat alone in the hangar, surrounded by silent machines and dim blue lights humming softly through the walls. His muscles ached everywhere. His mind buzzed with fear, possibility, and exhaustion. Mira entered quietly and sat beside him. "You improved today," she said. Ryland shook his head. "I ran into a wall. Twice. But you saw something the rest of us missed." She waited for him to answer. He exhaled slowly. "I do not know how to win." Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then focus on surviving first." The next morning arrived too quickly. A beam of alien light pierced through the training compound ceiling, illuminating the floor where Ryland stood. It was time for transport. The duel awaited in the stars. Soldiers saluted. Scientists watched with worry. Mira stepped forward one last time. "Bring yourself back alive." Ryland swallowed hard. "I will try." Earl floated next to him, scanning the beam with curiosity. "Probability of vaporization is low." The drone Rylan materialized on the Vorkan flagship with the unsettling sensation of being poured into existence rather than transported. The floor beneath him pulsed faintly, warm and metallic like he was standing on the back of a living creature. Alien symbols glowed across the walls, shifting in color as though reacting to his presence. Earl floated beside him, humming a soft diagnostic tone, seemingly unbothered by the fact that they were now in the heart of an enemy warship filled with beings who viewed humans as slightly smarter livestock. Rylan swallowed hard as he took in the vast chamber around him, which resembled equal parts throne room, laboratory, and intergalactic nightmare factory. He wondered if there were safety protocols for not vomiting on alien floors. A pair of armored Vorkan guards approached with the grace of predators and the disinterest of bureaucrats. They towered over Rylan, their armor etched with jagged patterns that resembled battle scars or possibly doodles created during strategic meetings. One guard scanned Rylan with a device that beeped in a manner he found personally insulting. The guard snorted and muttered in a guttural language that translated through Rylan's wristband as "This one will die quickly." Rylan frowned. "That is rude." The guard ignored him and marched forward. Apparently escort etiquette was not a Vorkan priority. The corridor they entered was illuminated by shifting neon veins running through the walls, casting eerie reflections on the polished floors. Rylan nearly tripped twice because he kept staring at everything in horrified fascination. The ship felt ancient yet alive, humming with an energy that made his skin tingle. Earl drifted beside him with a calm beep. Heart rate elevated. Perspiration increasing. Fear response typical for small mammals and predator environments. Rylan whispered back that Yarl could consider shutting up for just 1 minute. Earl beeped an apology in a tone that somehow suggested it was not sorry at all. The guards led Rylan into a chamber that made Earth's training sims look like cardboard stage props. The arena stretched so far that the horizon curved, as though it existed in a pocket dimension folded inside the ship. Floating platforms drifted lazily above a pit of swirling purple mist. Towers spiraled in impossible shapes, defying gravity and architectural logic. The entire space buzzed with unstable energy, shifting unpredictably like it had been designed by a committee of engineers who hated physics. Zyrex stood at the far end of the arena, admiring himself in a reflective panel while adjusting the spikes on his pauldrons. He turned dramatically as Rylan entered, spreading his arms as though greeting an audience. "Welcome, human. Behold the arena of challenges, a glorious battleground where countless warriors have fallen, where legends are forged, and where you will most certainly be crushed." Rylan raised a hand awkwardly. "Hello? I like what you have done with the floating death traps." Zyrex blinked, confused by the casual tone. Tala, who stood beside him inspecting a tablet covered in alien symbols, let out a quiet sigh. Zyrex motioned for the ceremony to begin. The arena shifted violently. Platforms rearranged themselves with booming force. Rylan stumbled as the ground beneath him rippled like a disturbed pond. Earl announced that structural stability was 90% illusory, which did not help Rylan's confidence. A booming voice echoed through the chamber, announcing the start of the qualification trials. Rylan frowned. Trials? No one mentioned trials. One must prove worthy before facing Zyrex, Tala explained. Think of it as warm-up exercises. Rylan grumbled that humans usually warmed up with stretching, not death puzzles. The first trial emerged from the mist with a roar. A creature that resembled a scorpion fused with a tank crawled toward him, its claws clicking like mechanical guillotines. Rylan grabbed the only object near him, a metallic rod that might have been a ceremonial staff or a curtain rod. The scorpitank lunged. Rylan dodged purely by panicking in the correct direction. The creature crashed into a pillar, shaking the arena. Rylan spotted a strange glowing seam along its side. "Weak point," he gasped. He hurled the rod at it but missed entirely. The rod bounced off a floating platform and struck a control node, disabling gravity in a 15-foot radius. Both Rylan and the creature floated upward, flailing wildly. Rylan grabbed onto its tail, swung himself like an acrobat who had no idea what he was doing, and accidentally slammed the creature headfirst into another control node, restoring gravity. They plummeted, The Scorpitank hit the floor with a crash. The creature collapsed. The arena declared Trial 1 complete. Ryland panted on his knees, relieved and horrified. Xyrix stared in disbelief. He defeated it through accident. Tala murmured that statistically speaking, Ryland's cave-space strategy was proving unexpectedly effective. Xyrix hissed. No strategy is based on chaos. Tala paused. Then you have never met humans. The second trial activated. The floor disappeared beneath Ryland, replaced by transparent platforms that flickered randomly. Ryland jumped from one to another, terrified each step might vanish mid-stride. Earl provided running commentary about survival probabilities, which fluctuated wildly from moment to moment. Ryland noticed the platforms responded to sound vibrations. Loud sounds stabilized them. Small sounds destabilized. He yelled constantly, producing a stream of panicked human noise that kept the platforms solid long enough for him to reach the far side. The arena declared Trial 2 complete. Xyrix looked like his brain was overheating. The third trial involved an obstacle course where the obstacles moved faster than Ryland's ability to swear. Rotating blades, laser grids, shifting walls, and portals that teleported him 5 feet backward every time he tried to make progress. After several failed attempts, Ryland realized the portal's targeted movement speed. He slowed his pace to a near crawl, stepping carefully, as though navigating a room filled with sleeping cats. The obstacles slowed with him, almost mocking him, but the portals no longer activated. Ryland reached the end with trembling legs. The arena announced Trial 3 complete. Xyrix growled in frustration. This human is not skilled. He is absurd. Tala tilted her head. Absurd can be effective. Finally, Xyrix stepped forward, clearly fed up with watching a technician outperform an elite combat arena through sheer chaotic luck and improvised thinking. Enough games. It is time for your humiliation to begin. Ryland wiped sweat from his forehead. Can we reschedule? He asked hopefully. Xyrix let out a roar that shook the arena. But something unexpected happened. The arena lights flickered. A strange tremor rattled the ship. Tala checked her tablet, frowning. A system fluctuation. Unrelated to the duel, she said. Probably. Ryland did not find probably reassuring. The guards dragged Ryland toward the center platform where the duel would begin. But for a moment, as everything shook, Ryland saw Tala glance at him with an expression he could not decipher. It looked almost like curiosity. Or doubt. Or something else entirely. The arena shifted again, this time settling into a more stable formation, as if the ship itself was holding its breath for what came next. The floating platforms arranged themselves into a circular battleground surrounded by a churning void of violet storm clouds. Electricity crackled through the mist, casting streaks of light across the metallic floor. Ryland stood at the center, knees trembling, feeling very much like a man waiting for an avalanche while holding a spoon. Xyrix approached with slow, deliberate steps, radiating a confidence so overwhelming it felt like a physical force pressing against Ryland's chest. The alien's armor gleamed as he flexed his claws, each movement sending a ripple of red energy through the air. You have survived the trials, human, Xyrix announced, his tone dripping with condescension. But surviving by accident is not the same as defeating me. Ryland swallowed hard. He knew that. The entire galaxy probably knew that. Earl hovered beside him, projecting a tiny holographic advisory that read "Breathe." Ryland whispered back that he was trying. Xyrix extended his arm, and a massive spear formed from a burst of energy, growing into a jagged weapon that hummed with lethal power. Ryland had no weapon whatsoever. The arena did not provide one, or perhaps it assumed he would not need anything since he would not live long enough to use it. Ryland raised his hands weakly. I do not suppose we can settle this with a board game. Xyrix responded by charging. The alien moved with frightening speed. His first strike created a shockwave that sent Ryland flying backward across the platform. Pain shot through Ryland's ribs, and his vision blurred. He rolled just in time to avoid a second blow that cracked the floor where his head had been. Earl beeped anxiously, calculating survival percentages that dropped so fast Rylan wished the drone would turn itself off. Xyrix loomed over him, spear raised high, fully prepared to end the duel within seconds. Rylan scrambled backward, desperate, and grabbed a small shard of fallen metal from the arena floor. It was barely larger than a butter knife. Xyrix laughed. Truly pathetic. Rylan held up the shard anyway, knowing it would not help, yet clinging to it because doing nothing felt worse. Xyrix thrust his spear downward, and Rylan rolled aside again, his heart slamming against his ribs. The impact sent cracked spiderwebbing across the floor and knocked loose several glowing nodes embedded in the ground. Rylan spotted them flashing erratically, their rhythm off-beat compared to the rest of the arena's pulse. He recognized the malfunction. The tremors earlier. The system instability Tala had mentioned. The arena was glitching. Rylan breathed out shakily, feeling a small spark of opportunity. Glitches he understood. Glitches he could use. Xyrix charged again, his massive figure a blur of dark armor. Rylan ducked behind one of the flickering nodes, and Xyrix's spear struck it directly. The node erupted in a burst of chaotic energy, launching Xyrix backward and temporarily shorting his armor's outer plating. Rylan stumbled to his feet, clutching his side, and blinked in shock. That should not have worked. Surprisingly, that worked, ERL confirmed. Xyrix roared in anger, furious at being embarrassed even momentarily. His armor flickered again, revealing that faint seam Rylan had noticed during training. Rylan's mind raced. That weakness was real. Xyrix lunged with renewed fury, swinging his spear in a tight arc that barely missed Rylan's throat. The force of the swing sent Rylan tumbling across the ground. He rolled until he hit a pillar, gasping for breath. Pain radiated through his entire body. He knew he could not keep dodging forever. Xyrix approached, each step echoing like a war drum. You are delaying the inevitable, human. Accept your fate. Rylan coughed, pushing himself upright. Sorry, I have a strict no-dying policy. His attempt at humor only enraged Xyrix further. The alien struck again, and Rylan ducked behind the pillar. Xyrix smashed through it effortlessly. Debris scattered, and the platform shook. Rylan used the distraction to dart toward another exposed energy node, this one sparking wildly. He kicked it as hard as he could. His foot immediately regretted the decision, but the node exploded again, sending a jolt of energy directly into Xyrix's midsection. The alien staggered, armor flickering more noticeably now. The seam along his ribs glowed faintly. Rylan knew this was his only chance. But he had nothing capable of penetrating that armor, nothing except the tiny metal shard still clutched in his trembling hand. Xyrix recovered quickly, shaking off the interference. Enough. This ends now. He charged one last time, swinging the spear downward in a killing blow. Rylan did not dodge. Instead, he threw himself forward, inside the arc of the strike, and plunged the shard into the glowing seam with every ounce of strength he had. The shard pierced through. Xyrix let out a roar of shock and pain, staggering backward as sparks erupted from the wound. His armor lost structural integrity, collapsing inward as if the entire suit had been holding itself together with sheer pride. Xyrix fell to one knee, his breath ragged. Rylan collapsed as well, panting, bleeding, barely conscious. He had done the impossible. He had wounded a champion of galactic warfare. Xyrix stared at him with fury and disbelief. How did you know? Rylan coughed painfully. Because your armor design is terrible. Xyrix hissed. Tala approached quickly, her expression unreadable. Rylan braced for guards to drag him away, or for Xyrix to finish him with a desperate strike. But something worse happened. Xyrix laughed. Not a laugh of defeat. A laugh of triumph. Did you think this duel mattered? Xyrix growled. It was a spectacle. A distraction. Rylan froze, dread rising like ice water in his veins. Xyrix continued. Even as we fought, my forces began descending upon your planet. The invasion is already underway. Your world falls regardless of this outcome. Rylan's heart seemed to stop. He looked at Tala, horrified, expecting her to gloat as well. Instead, she stepped closer and lowered her voice. Xyrix is telling the truth. But he has violated galactic law. And I do not support this. Before Ryland could speak, she pressed something small and metallic into his palm. A device humming with energy. This will get you off the ship. And when you reach Earth, tell Mira that Xyrix has broken Treaty Code 43 Section 9. She will understand. The arena alarms blared. Guards rushed in as Tala activated the device. Ryland felt the floor vanish beneath him as light swallowed his vision. Xyrix roared in rage. But Ryland was already gone, hurtling back toward Earth, carrying the key to exposing the greatest deception in the galaxy. Ryland crashed back onto Earth with all the grace of a falling appliance, stumbling out of the teleporter beam and landing in a heap at the center of the Earth Defense Command hangar. Soldiers nearby jumped, weapons raised, until someone shouted his name and the room erupted into a mix of disbelief, relief, and panic. Mira rushed forward, brushing dust and scorched metal from his jacket as Ryland tried to stand on legs that felt like soggy noodles. "You are alive," she said, the crack in her voice betraying how unsure she had been. Barely, Ryland wheezed. "Also, Earth might be in a lot more trouble than we thought." The hangar doors burst open as alarms began screaming through the facility. Red lights flashed, emergency screens activated, and personnel sprinted through corridors with the frantic energy of people who had rehearsed this scenario but never believed they would need it. A lieutenant gasped out the report. Vorkan dropships entering atmosphere. Multiple points of contact. Global strike imminent. Mira cursed under her breath and dragged Ryland toward the command center. The situation display flickered to life, revealing dozens of alien vessels breaking through the clouds like obsidian daggers aimed at cities. Ryland felt his stomach twist as he watched the invasion actually unfold. Xyrix had not been bluffing. The duel had been nothing more than theater to distract Earth while the real assault began. But before Ryland could sink into despair, he remembered the device Tala had given him. He pulled it from his pocket, placing it on the table. Mira frowned at its strange shape until recognition flashed in her eyes. Treaty code device. "Where did you get this?" Ryland explained quickly, his words tumbling out as Mira listened with growing astonishment. "Xyrix violated the law by attacking during the duel. If we broadcast proof, we can force the Vorkan fleet to withdraw or risk triggering a galactic tribunal." Mira looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. "Ryland, you might have just given us the only leverage we have left." Before they could activate the device, a thunderous explosion rocked the compound. Dust rained from the ceiling. Distant screams echoed down the corridor. The main power grid flickered. The Vorkan had struck the base directly. Soldiers scrambled into defensive formation as Mira grabbed Ryland by the arm. "Come on! We have to reach the uplink tower." It was the only structure capable of broadcasting the treaty violation signal across the planet. Unfortunately, it also sat at the top of the compound, exposed to the outside like a giant "please attack me" sign. Earl zoomed ahead, projecting a map of the safest route, which somehow involved 3 unsafe stairwells, a hallway partially on fire, and a ventilation shaft that Ryland did not fit into no matter how hard he sucked in his stomach. By the time they reached the ground-level exit, the battle outside had erupted into full chaos. The sky raged with streaks of blue and red as Earth's defense aircraft clashed with Vorkan raiders. Buildings shuddered under bombardments. The ground trembled with every impact. Ryland stepped outside and froze, overwhelmed by the sight. He had watched the invasion from orbit in horror, but seeing it firsthand was entirely different. Earth was fighting back valiantly, but the Vorkan technology was advanced and merciless. Mira pulled him behind a barricade as a dropship landed nearby, its doors peeling open to unleash armored warriors. Soldiers opened fire. The Vorkan charged through the smoke like beasts carved from metal and fury. Ryland felt the treaty device in his pocket, and knew everything depended on reaching the tower. They darted across the ruined courtyard, dodging falling debris and stray blasts. A Vorkan soldier lunged at them, armor glowing with hostile energy. Mira fired repeatedly, forcing it back while shouting for Rylan to move. Rylan was more than willing to obey. Earl, for the first time in its existence, sounded genuinely alarmed. Hostile proximity extremely high. Recommend running faster than your usual human speed. Rylan shouted that he was trying while tripping over a chunk of broken concrete. They pressed deeper into the battlefield as Earth forces rallied around them. Soldiers recognized Rylan and shouted encouragement that felt wildly disproportionate to the fact that he was currently hiding behind Mira like a terrified child. But the morale boost they felt upon seeing him was real. The man who had faced Xyrix was here. The man who had dealt the first wound to the undefeatable champion. Even if the facts behind that wound were significantly more chaotic than heroic. A blast struck the ground near them, sending Rylan and Mira sprawling. Rylan rolled behind a fallen drone turret, heart pounding. A Vorkan warrior approached with heavy steps, raising its crackling weapon. Before it could strike, a bolt of green energy shot through the air, disabling the warrior in a single blow. Rylan blinked in disbelief as a familiar figure stepped forward through the smoke. Tala. She adjusted her goggles with a sigh. Humans really do make everything messy. Mira aimed her rifle. Why is she here? Tala raised her hands. To help. Xyrix has gone too far. My loyalty does not extend to stupidity. Rylan nodded desperately. Trust her. She gave me the device. Mira hesitated, then lowered her weapon slightly. Fine. But one betrayal and I will personally invent a new definition of punishment. Tala shrugged. That seems fair. With Tala guiding them and ERL recalculating routes, they carved a path toward the uplink tower. Tala's knowledge of Vorkan weapon systems allowed her to disable squads of raiders with surgical precision. Mira fought with relentless determination. Rylan did his best not to die. They reached the tower's base just as more dropships descended. Tala grabbed Rylan by the collar and shoved him toward the stairwell. Go. Activate the broadcast. I will hold them off. Mira stayed with her, firing at advancing enemies while shouting for Rylan to keep climbing. Rylan sprinted up the tower stairs, lungs burning. The city stretched below him in a storm of fire and metal. At the top, the control panel flickered erratically from earlier damage. He slammed the device onto the interface. The tower hummed. Lights surged. The signal began to amplify. Alarms screamed as the Vorkan fleet detected the activation. Rylan held his breath, watching the signal bar crawl upward. 5%. 20. 40. Come on! The tower shook under bombardment. 60. 70. The lights dimmed. 85. 90. The system sparked violently. 98. The broadcast detonated across the sky like a flare of pure energy. Tala's recorded statement, Xyrix's violation, the dual interruption, all projected planet-wide and ship-wide. The Vorkan fleet froze. Every raider's ship halted mid-assault as treaty law triggered. A ripple of enforced compliance swept through them like an invisible command chain. And far above Earth, Xyrix realized too late that his conquest had just become a galactic crime. The sky went unnaturally quiet. The battlefield below froze in a moment, suspended between destruction and disbelief. Vorkan dropships halted midair, their weapon systems flickering as if confused. The massive assault ships above the clouds stopped firing entirely, their engines humming in a restrained idle that seemed impossible after such relentless violence. Soldiers on both sides stared upward, waiting for something to happen, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or the prelude to something worse. Rylan stood at the top of the uplink tower, chest heaving, sweat and dust streaking his face. The device in the console still glowed faintly, the broadcast it unleashed now echoing around the globe and across the fleet like a cosmic accusation carved in stone. Myra's voice crackled through his earpiece. Rylan, is it done? He could hear gunfire and clashing metal below, but far less than before. Rylan swallowed, his throat dry. Yes. It is done. Treaty violation has been broadcast. If any of this galactic law stuff works, they have to stop. Mira exhaled, the sound shaking. Then let us hope bureaucratic aliens are as terrifyingly strict as they sound. A deafening roar echoed from above, making Ryland's heart jolt. Through the dissipating smoke, a massive descending shape broke through the clouds. Xyrix's personal command vessel. The ship hovered with a fury that felt almost alive. Panels shifted, engines snarled, lights flared blood red. The ship's lower hatch opened and a large platform lowered, carrying Xyrix himself. His armor was damaged from their duel but restored enough to gleam with renewed menace. His eyes blazed with rage as he landed heavily on the tower, cracking the concrete under his feet. "You," Xyrix snarled, advancing toward Rylan. "You insignificant creature. You dare sabotage my conquest." Rylan backed away, gripping the railing behind him so hard he thought it might snap. "I mean, technically I dared, yes," he said, breathless. Xyrix thrust forward with crippling speed, grabbing Rylan by the front of his jacket and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The human dangled helplessly as Xyrix's claws tightened. "Because of you, because of your interference, the fleet cannot proceed. Treaty law binds them, but it does not bind me. I will eradicate you with my bare hands." Before Xyrix could crush him, a bolt of energy shot upward and struck the alien's arm, making him release Rylan with a roar of pain. Tala and Mira emerged onto the rooftop, scrambling across the debris and smoke. Xyrix turned toward them, eyes narrowing in betrayal. "You dare stand with them, Tala? You defy your own kind." Tala leveled her weapon, goggles reflecting the red sparks of Xyrix's damaged armor. "I defy stupidity. You broke the treaty. You brought shame upon the fleet. You nearly destabilized an entire galactic sector. For what? Ego." Xyrix bared his teeth. "You will be punished for your treason." Tala smirked. "Then stand in line." Xyrix lunged toward Tala with frightening speed, and Mira fired round after round to cover her retreat. The rooftop erupted into chaos as the alien champion pursued them with wild fury. Rylan scrambled to his feet, chest aching, mind spinning. He knew one thing: Xyrix could kill all of them if someone did not stop him. Uro buzzed anxiously beside him. "Rylan, Xyrix's armor is vulnerable in the same location as earlier. Encouragingly, your chances of repeating that success are approximately 2%. Rylan groaned. "Why do you always tell me the odds?" Uro beeped. "To help you plan." Rylan shook his head. "You should consider lying sometimes." Xyrix swung at Mira, who barely dodged, the impact creating a crater in the rooftop. Tala unleashed another blast, but Xyrix deflected it, advancing with monstrous determination. Rylan looked around wildly. He needed a weapon. Something sharp. Something strong. Something not currently being used as part of a collapsing tower. His eyes caught a broken support rod jutting from the rubble. He snatched it up, feeling ridiculous but desperate. He ran toward Xyrix with a shout that sounded braver in his head than it did out loud. Xyrix turned, annoyed more than threatened. "You again." Rylan swung the rod. Xyrix grabbed it midair, snapped it in half, and threw the pieces aside. Rylan stumbled backward, horrified. Xyrix reached for him, but before he could seize him, Tala shouted something in Vorkan. Xyrix paused just long enough for Mira to fire a blast that struck the weak seam in his armor, making him stagger. Tala yelled to Rylan. "The law binds him if you declare formal challenge invocation. Say the words." His brain spun. "The what?" Tala shouted louder. "Vorkan law. If he broke the treaty during a duel, you can force a final judgment combat. A judgment he must obey." Rylan blinked rapidly. "How do you know all that?" "I read the manual," she snapped. Xyrix roared in frustration, realizing what she was revealing. Rylan swallowed, stepped forward, and shouted with every ounce of strength he had left. "Xyrix. By Treaty Code 43 Section 9, I invoke Judgment Combat." All movement in the battle stopped. Xyrix froze mid-step, as though hit by an invisible command. His eyes widened with pure rage. "How dare you use our laws against me?" Rylan gasped. "You really should stop publishing your rulebooks publicly. It makes conquering harder. The sky above them shimmered with energy as the invocation triggered. A glowing circle formed around Xyrix and Rylan, separating them from the battlefield like a cosmic courtroom. Xyrix was forced to face him. No weapons. No interference. Only judgment combat. The alien flexed his claws. Very well, human. If I win, Earth falls. If you win, I am bound to withdraw. Rylan felt his legs tremble. I was afraid you would say that. Xyrix struck first, his claws slicing through the air where Rylan had stood a moment before. Rylan ducked, rolled, and scrambled desperately as Xyrix's attacks tore into the rooftop. Each strike left craters and sparks. Mira watched helplessly from outside the circle, unable to intervene. Tala muttered tense calculations under her breath. Earl hovered anxiously, its recording light blinking. Rylan dodged wildly, adrenaline burning through his veins. He spotted another piece of broken metal, small but sharp. Xyrix lunged again. Rylan dodged under the alien's arm and stabbed at the seam with everything he had. The shard pierced slightly but not enough. Xyrix hissed and struck him across the back, sending him sprawling. Pain exploded through Rylan's body. He struggled to rise, gasping. Xyrix approached slowly, savoring the moment. You are weak, human. And yet you cause me more trouble than any warrior I have ever faced. Rylan coughed. I will take that as a compliment. Xyrix raised his arm for the final blow. In that instant, something clicked in Rylan's mind. Xyrix's attacks were fast, powerful, but always predictable at the start of each motion. The armor seam only opened when Xyrix twisted sharply. Rylan forced himself to stand, forcing Xyrix into another rotational strike. Come on! Just one more mistake. Xyrix lunged. Rylan stepped forward instead of back, forcing Xyrix to pivot. The seam opened. Rylan drove the shard into the weakness with every ounce of desperation and hope he had left. Xyrix screamed as energy burst from the breach. The judgment circle shattered. Xyrix collapsed to the ground, defeated by treaty law and a terrified human with a piece of scrap metal. The Vorkan champion lay motionless, armor failing. The fleet above flickered, receiving the automatic command,